So good morning, everybody. I'm Sean Harris. I'm Vice President here at IDMWORKS. We'll talk a little bit about IDMWORKS, but the concept of what we want to talk about today is how to quit wrestling with your identity and access management problems, your program, your projects. Just real quick from the shameless self-promotion slide, IDMWORKS is about 135, 140 person dedicated identity and access management advisory through implementation services firm. We do everything from development of programs all the way through the execution of software deployments and the execution of broad-scale identity programs. We'll talk about the difference between projects and programs as we go through the day, but we cover all facets of identity and access management. Pretty much every vendor that you want to look at, as well as providing some of the missing integration points directed to the creation of connectivity between homegrown or specialized applications and those programs. I don't know, did I say something wrong already? Was it me? It was me. The other thing is, look, I bring bodyguards, so and the next person moves, he's getting sumoed. So again, the concept is stop wrestling with your identity and access management program. If you think about it, is anybody in the room martial artist, combat sports, anything, anybody, any formal training, boxers, anything? Okay, so I said stop wrestling. I'm going to use every fight analogy under the sun because there wasn't enough wrestling and I didn't think you guys wanted to see Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage wrestling through this. And plus, we've got a 4-time world champion sumo wrestler hanging out with us at the booth today. So I wanted to make sure that we've got some imagery here. So listen, if you think about this from a fights perspective, right? The reigning champion, right? Identity and access management, the 800-pound gorilla. Identity and access management programs and challenges have been difficult for us for years and years and years. I gave this guy a professional record of knocking everybody out 1,943 times. 2 defeats, right? 2 successful identity and access management projects to date. Unless, there's some people say, hey, look, I've been very successful with one of these projects. But I'm talking from a program perspective, right? You think about, what's this guy bringing to the table? Where's he going? The finishing moves, right? Crippling budget overrun, right? The constantly changing requirements, scope creep, everybody coming out and trying to change everything before it gets done. And the lack of internal understanding related to what identity is bringing to the table for the business so that the rest of the organization can get behind and stop calling you the office of no, right? Because, look, anybody, security, it's like, oh, yeah, hey, we don't want to get involved in that because they just want to stop us. But the challenger, right, is the identity management project team. And they're bringing variable experience. You've got new people. You've got people that have been doing it for 20 some odd years. Professional record of, dear Lord, I hope it goes better than it did the last time. With a constantly shrinking budget and a rapidly changing team, and maybe you get a couple of interns thrown at you that can help you out. I will say help you out throughout the whole thing. But sometimes the fight's just a little bit unfair. Sometimes the odds are stacked against you. Unfortunately, the identity and access management game has been going on forever and a day, right? And it just seems as though that these projects are huge and they're menacing, right? And you've got project requirements from your organization that now you need to meet in order to satisfy the business as to what's going on. But the problem is, identity and access management's been out here forever, right? It's been constantly morphing, so it feels a little suffocating. It feels as though that it's hard to approach this thing, but I'm going to give you a couple of tips on what we can do from it. So today we'll talk about a number of different things. We'll talk about the fundamental issues of identity management. We'll talk about the market. We'll talk about what the vendors are bringing to the table and how they're making our life a little bit more challenging. We'll talk about the internal and external issues. I'll give you a game plan, some tips and tricks on how it might make things a little bit easier for you. So let's talk about the fundamentals of it. I started in identity management. I know the baby face that throws you off a little bit, but I actually got into the identity management game in 1996. 1996, I would argue, because that's where I got into it, so it must be the beginning of time. I would argue that when New Dimension Software was acquired by BMC Software and Control SA really hit the market space is where the beginning of modern identity management hit. That was the beginning of security administration. How many people in the room have been doing identity management specifically for 5 years or more? How about 10 years or more? How far back do you go? 2006. Did we hear 04? And Sarah? 98, right? So you remember all the way back to the beginning where it was security administration. Okay, for the record, anybody else decides to leave, Biamba's going to lock the door. All right? I don't know if he's going to lock the door or block the door, one of the two, but hey, look, I speak softly and carry a big sumo wrestler. But the vendors change. The vendors acquire one another. The vendors are constantly innovating so that you get more value from their software, right? And this constant innovation becomes a little bit complex. This leads to this concept around analysis paralysis. If you think about it, how many, can anybody name 20 different identity companies, right? For every identity management company that you can name, there's probably another 2 that you haven't heard of yet that you're trying to keep up on. I talked with one of our clients who is a security architect, and he was saying, look, it's almost impossible for me to keep up with all of the changes. Yeah, you're good. Listen, if you stand there, I got something better to look at, I promise you. He was saying it's impossible for him to keep up with all the reading. It's impossible for him to keep up with all of the technology, but yet this is what he does for a living, right? Think about that for a second. My job is to keep up with the trends, but the vendors change. The vendors realign. They innovate. They come up with something new, the new shiny orb that you need to put your focus onto, okay? And it stops him from making business decisions to move forward in order to achieve his organization's goals because they don't know if they should wait for the next release or the next product. So they're paralyzed. The value of identity management historically has been difficult to even justify internally. 98. What was the cost justification for identity management in 1998? Okay, you're not 98. She was 98. You're 1943. He looks good for his age, though, by the way. What was the cost justification for identity and access management in 98? Reduce headcount. Reduce the calls at the help desk, right? Solve administrative things, right? Great answer. You get a sumo wrestler. You got to have the little one. The big one is busy. There you go. This one. But no, yep, there. Oh, you see, I just saved your life, lady. I mean, he fires a sumo wrestler at you. You try to catch Ebby out in the hallway. So today, organizations are still trying to justify it. And what I'm hearing now is back 20 years ago it was simple. 20 years ago it was, hey, look, if I can cut down the number of calls to my help desk, if I can cut down the number of administrators that I need, the RACF administrator, the Unix administrator, the Windows administrator, if I can get them under one pane of glass 20 years ago, I can show reduction in FTE. Today, that's soft dollar, right? Today, that's, oh my God, we've been trying to justify like that for 20 years. Today, we want to talk about risk avoidance. We want to talk about the value to the business enablement. But the challenge is, even though we're talking at a higher business level, we're now faced with, great, you're going to tell me that I'm going to be able to enable my business? Quantify it for me. You want to spend $1 million on software and $1 million on services? Please, do me a favor, quantify. And it just becomes a little bit more of a challenge. We've got 1,000 answers for that. Yes, the problem is that every organization is different because without understanding the underlying business, and really, you've got to lift up the hood on the business. So I apologize. Shameless self-promotion again. So IDMWORKS, we differentiate ourselves because before we make any recommendations, before we make any decisions as to what's good for our client, we actually take a lot of time and effort to understand what our clients are trying to accomplish. We meet with a number of layers inside the organization so that we can really, when we come back to them and say, hey, listen, we think here is the value. It's based on your business, not the last business that we talked to, or the same justification that we used 3 years ago. Identity and access management is as custom fit as it gets, okay? But can we help move systems to the cloud? Can we secure the cloud? Can we use the cloud to hit a bigger market space? Can we reduce cost? Sure. All of these things apply, but it's a long back and forth of understanding and working in partnership to get to that. So we'll come back to that in a minute if that's okay. How many people in this room have heard identity management projects are doomed to fail? Right? Look, this side of the room thinks it's going to fail. This side, I love this. It's like Family Feud now, right? Everybody over here thinks it's doomed. Everybody here is like, no, it's cool. Look, I hear that a lot. As a matter of fact, one of the CISOs that I work closely with, he said to me, he goes, you do realize that my CIO has already told me that my job is now 2 years and ticking, right? Because I signed up for an identity and access management project. So I'll be looking for a new job in 2 years. I'm like, well, that's harsh, and it's unfair, and it just doesn't make sense for the fact that people are saying and doing these things. Because if approached correctly, if approached from a perspective that says, hey, look, we can give you a plan on how to execute, the projects don't need to fail. The program doesn't need to fail. Okay? At the end of the day, the underlying issue is somewhat stable. Who has access to what? Is the access appropriate? What can they do with the access? Who gave them the access? And can I prove it in an audit? Right? I mean, that's where we're at. That's identity management at its core. So look, you got to have the right mindset. And I went out and I was thinking about this, and I went out and I started looking up definitions of project and program. So project is a specific plan or design. This is that task that you need to complete in order to make that guy happy. Okay? But a program is a combination of projects. A program is a number of projects, a number of actions that we move forward with in concert to solve a broader goal. And we had a great conversation, one of my CEOs and I, we had a great conversation with somebody after a presentation yesterday, and he was figuring this out. And he said, well, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that if I go and do project after project after project, I may be doing myself a disservice? And I said, yes. The answer to that question is yes, absolutely. How many people take on projects to satisfy specific business requirements? Right? Few of you, right? I mean, that's the trend. The trend is we buy technology to satisfy a use case. Use cases without a broader plan of attack may put you in a worse situation 2 or 3 years down the road. For the record, if I wasn't scared about splitting my pants down the thing, it was very comfortable. I was going to do that as well, but the pants split and it'd be a whole disaster. You guys will be talking about that instead of this. See, it's no good. So the argument is, if we try to run down the road satisfying individual business units, individual project owners, individual line of business requirements that say, hey, I need single sign-on. Well, let me go get you a single sign-on, right? And the line of business says, I need a CASB solution. They go out and, shadow IT, right? They go on out and they run themselves, they get this other thing. But what do you have at the end of that? You guys remember the movie Christmas Vacation, when Clark pulls the Christmas lights up, right? It's this giant ball of Christmas lights, right? When we talk to our clients, we use that image, and it's a stressful image. You pull up that ball of Christmas lights. Sometimes identity and access management projects, even when the projects individually are very successful, when put together into a program, the technologies don't work together, okay? This leads to everybody still fighting the same challenges that we've had the years before. I've got the best tools, and this is a specific statement from one of our clients. I've got the best tools money can buy. I spent millions of dollars on vendor technology, and I've got the best. This guy had every product you could buy from Ping, every product you could buy from SailPoint. He's got cyber. He's got X, Y, Z. He's got them all out there. And I said, that is great. How's it working? And he says, this is a giant tangled mess of spaghetti because we implemented them individually. We did not implement them as one program. And because we didn't have a plan, an architecture to get us from A to B, we ran ourselves into a rat's nest of software. So we talked about what are the things that are going to stop us from being successful as a whole, right? You talk about the external factors. I'm trying to see, I don't see any of my vendors out. There's any software vendors in the room? No? Good, let's talk about them for a little bit more. Look, those guys get together and they're changing everything. And look, their story's going to change in order to satisfy your requirement so that you engage on their specific technology. And I promise you, their technology will do everything you want it to do, right? Right up until the point where you sign that PO and now you've got to implement it, right? It's not taking care of your kids. It's not making you a smoothie. I know the sales guy said that it would. It's not going to do it. They're constantly changing it. That innovation challenge that these vendors, the pressure that they're under from Gartner to innovate, confuses the market space. They're not sitting to their core expertise, and they're not developing that platform, right? They're extending. They're trying to make the next thing. They're trying to make the next product ID that they can sell to the broad-based market, right? And then there's the deployment issues, right? Everybody in this room's had very smooth vendor deployments. Is that right? Right? There's not a single hand up in the room. Why do we think that is? Why do we think that is? We had to evaluate an environment, and they had deployed a privileged identity tool, and the privileged identity tool was deployed in a proof of concept. The proof of concept was promoted to production, right? It's a brilliant idea, right? It worked in the proof of concept, so it must be good, right? Let's just promote that thing. It's unfortunate, right? The testing, the evaluation phase, it may not be exactly what it is that you're looking for. The reality is the software is good. The software is good, but you have to have a long-term mindset. And we'll talk about the little tips and tricks here in a second or two. But even just the concept of brand X may be the best tool for this technology, but when I start thinking about my program and all the other things that I need to align to it, the governance tool has to work with my privilege tool, has to work with my federation tool, has to work with my multi-factor authentication tool. At that point, that tool may not be the right choice because of the other technologies that you own or that you're looking to own, right? You've got to look at this thing from a programmatic perspective. The internal factors. You start looking at this, right, and sponsors, right? You've got the executives out there, and the executives don't necessarily understand what's going on. You know you have a $2 million problem. They give you a $500,000 budget. It's because they don't understand the value that you're going to bring back to the organization. We can help, right? We, the Identiverse, we can help and help you drive kind of the business value of these different things. The conflicting priorities and the technical debt. Look, it's fantastic that we're going to take on an identity management problem. That's great. We fully encourage you to look at this. And, when automated correctly, you can get great value out of these things. But the problem is you have to be realistic about what else your team has on their plate today. Your team today has got other requirements. They've got other projects. They have to maintain the environment that you're displacing with the new technology, right? So can we do this? Can we bring this forward? The expectations, again, no vendors have walked into the room. So again, vendors will set expectations as to what the software is going to do and how we're going to get down the road. The challenge being that sometimes those expectations are a little bit difficult, right? How many people have an automated provisioning system in-house today? Right? For the people that didn't raise your hand, is that I'm shy, or is that because we don't have an automated provisioning and governance tool? Yeah? Okay. How many people were told that that's going to solve 100% of all of your applications inside the environment? Right? If you go back to 1998, the argument was, this thing is the coolest thing since crushed ice. It's going to hit 100% of applications. The vendors have gotten better. Now they're saying, hey, look, we're going to solve about, we're going to solve 80% of it. The reality is, we come on site a lot of times, we're still seeing the multi-million-dollar deployment that has solved 3 endpoints. Okay, I saw one customer, and is there anybody from Australia in the room by chance? No? I was with a customer in Australia one time. They had spent more money than I care to even repeat, but yet they were still doing manual certifications. Their tool did automated recertification. They were still doing them manually because they didn't know the tool could do what they were trying to do. Okay? That's after 8 figures. Right? Look, the universal factors, funding and headcount. Who has enough staff? Everybody? Everybody's good? Anybody need a couple extra bodies? Right? Look, there's too many requirements. There's too many technologies. There's not enough money. There's not enough people. There's too many auditors, right? Look, these are the things that we're faced with. So, look, you start developing a game plan. Just get your mind around the fact that a project is going to take you 6 to 12 months. A program is going to take you a couple years. Okay? And that doesn't mean that you have to satisfy what the program is today and lock it in for the next 3 years, because business still keeps moving on, right? We talked about that concept of technical debt, and you could develop a whole lot more technical debt if you're not paying attention to it. So today, we develop our program. In 3 months and 6 months, we reevaluate what's in the program, but start from a programmatic perspective. Have that game plan. Get a strategy and stick to the strategy, but make sure your strategy is comprehensive. You don't want a strategy that says, I am going to fix multi-factor authentication, full stop. You want a strategy that fits into a program. My multi-factor has to work with these applications and these set of automated tools. It has to work in the broader context of what's going on. Look at this from a short-term ROI wins perspective. You know what I call a project that shows measurable results every 90 days? Funded. All right? At the end of the day, if you show the business wins every 90 days, if you have a partner, whether that be the vendor partner or an implementation services partner, if you have a partner that's working with you in partnership, that understands your business, that understands what your returns need to be, okay? This is an organization that can help you show the executive management team, the board of directors, that their investment's actually coming back and giving them a return. It goes without saying, but document and broadcast your success. When you meet one of these objectives, when you hit that point, when you get that ROI, document it, broadcast it. It's got to go to the board of directors. If you don't have board of directors access, you go to the CIO, you make sure that shows up in the next board meeting. Because when the board of directors see that we're taking risk out of the business, that we're creating efficiency, that we're reducing cost, they want to invest more. Because every one of them wakes up in the morning and says, we got to take risk out, right? That's their problem. They don't understand that it's identity risk. They just want to reduce risk. They want to reduce cost. You know that guy? It's a good-looking guy. All right. So listen, we'll talk about a couple tips and tricks. I got about a minute left on here. I want to stop and I want to answer any questions. The best advice that I can give to everybody in this room, stop what you're doing. Stop. Take a step back. Pause. If you can't stop because business has to drive, I understand completely. But please, pause. Pause long enough to understand what's going on around that project in the context of a broader identity program. If you're not thinking of an identity program, your projects are going to run into each other and we're going to get that tangled Christmas lights. Anybody that will listen to you about the value of identity needs to hear about the value of identity. They have to stop hearing us as the office of future prevention, right? They have to stop thinking of us as the office of no. They have to understand that we're here to help them scale. If we can assimilate the new acquisition much more quickly by giving them their user credentials, by giving them their environments, by giving them the same level of service that we give to everybody else, if we can make that new acquisition happen in 2 weeks as opposed to 2 months, We get more return out of that. We want to go hit the next acquisition. Find a partner. Now, listen, the word partner is grossly overused. The word partner is thrown around, and it's been made cheap, right? Everybody wants to be your partner. You know the difference between your vendor and you know the difference between your partner. You do. It's got to get voiced. The organization that sits down and tells you the truth, regardless of how bad that truth is, sounds a little bit more like a partner than a vendor. The one that tells you, hey, everything's going to be great. This is easy. This is going to be simple. We're going to drive this down the road. It's going to take 2 months to do the project that in your head you're thinking is going to take me a year and a half. That sounds a little bit more like a vendor, all right? And it could be implementation firms, right? And it could be software guys. So be wary of those guys that say this stuff is simple. You guys know better. My friend from 1998, it's never been easy, has it? She's looking down here, looking at it. Right? It's never been easy. Since 98, it hadn't been easy at all, has it? But yet you stick with it. I applaud your chutzpah. So look, final point, find yourself a good trusted advisor. Find somebody who's been down this road before. You know, your organization will take on a couple of projects. What you need to do is you need to find yourself an organization that's been down this road. You need to find that partner that's going to be fair. It's going to give you the truth. It's going to give you everything you need to know about how to make these things happen, and can speak to you and to your executives about where these things are. So that's the last point that I wanted to make, and I know that I've hit the end of time here, but I did want to pause and see if there was any questions in the room before I jump out and transition to the next speaker. Any questions? Yes, sir. So yes, just making sure there's no ping people in the room that doesn't want me talking about the company too much. Yes, sir. So we make sure that as we go through projects, that we've got executive summaries, we've got kind of the returns, and we're constantly working with our project sponsors, the executive sponsors of the projects, to make sure that they're getting exactly what they wanted, so that they have the, what we call the easy button, right? The easy button is the small set of slides that are actually going to be read by the CIO, CFO, CEO, chairman, so that they've got tangible, hey, this is where we started, here's what we're doing, here's where we are right now, here's where we're going to go. Yes, sir. Yeah, it's important. You have to do it. The question was, do we provide that kind of clarity and those kinds of, in the project plan, do we provide those kind of metrics for the executives? Any other questions before I go on to the guys that are going to sing? No? All right, so I do want to thank you. I appreciate everybody coming out this morning. The room looks a whole lot better now because they knew the next guys were talking. But really, thank you guys for taking the time. I do appreciate it. Cheers.